Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the whole story. Um, I know it's been a couple weeks since we were here last. I think last episode I was here chatting with everybody was right before Eve North, so a lot's happened since then. I am sure some of you guys are have already heard some of a lot of stuff, but tonight, because it was asked for by several people, I've got a crew of wormholers here with me, and what we're going to be talking about tonight is a bit of our reactions to some of the stuff that's going on. We're going to talk about how some of that might end up impacting wormhole space either immediately or in the long term, as well as just get a completely different angle than maybe what you've heard and we've talked about in some of the other shows and whatnot about what's wormhole space think of everything that's going on in Eve. How do we think CCP is doing? We've seen a lot of action from CCP the past couple weeks, and it's kind of interesting to see where CCP is maneuvering us and taking Eve lately. So those are some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. And I will try not to die from coughing because that always happens to me while I'm streaming, apparently. Alrighty. And so before we dig too deep into the rest of the meat of the show, right now Talking in Stations is being sponsored by PushX. So I'm gonna read a real fast advertisement from PushX, and then we'll dig into introducing the guest tonight. So, if you're not familiar with who PushX is the number one and premier hauling service in New Eden. They serve high-sec, low-sec, null-sec, soft space, and now they even go to Thera. They utilize everything from interceptors to deep space transports and freighters. No load is too big to handle for PushX. Or at least that's what they're claiming. So if you want to test that, please feel free. If you want to get your hauling done quickly and affordably, check out their website at pushx.net, and you can also stop by their in-game channel, PushX. With a PushX account, you can easily follow your contracts in their queue, and all of their average delivery times are posted onto their Twitter account at PushXNet on Twitter. They want to thank everyone for letting them serve you, and they've been doing it since 2012. Don't move it, push it. All right. There's our sponsor ad for the night. And without further ado, we're going to dig into who we've got joining us for tonight. So, I was actually just joking about this right before the show started. This is our first episode where I have a repeat guest since we started on the whole story. So, joining us tonight, we've got Icarus 100. Um, and he's from Laserhawks, and this is his second time he's joined us here on the whole story. We've also got Mr. Snowden, Bear That Cares, and Blood Ruin, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves and who they're flying with. So, would you like to go first, Mr. Snowden?
Sure, I can go for that. Thank you, XL. So my name is Mr. Snowden. I'm the CEO of Hateful Intent, Alliance Hostile Intervention. We live in a C2 null static C5. Mainly, we're a corporation specialized in work contracts, evictions, counter evictions, the fun games, wormhole space, and on the side, hunting null sec or anywhere we can get content. We're about medium sized, so good bros, have a lot of fun. A couple of these guys have flown with us before, so that's a little bit about us. We can pass it on to the next guy.
Alrighty. So I semi-introduced him, but I'll let him do it again. We've got Icarus 100 joining us from Laserhawks.
Hi, yeah, I'm Icarus from Laserhawks. We're a C5 Corp. I guess one of the bigger and more established wormhole corps. And yeah, we try to kill everything we can.
Short and simple, it sounds like. They kill everything they can. That's Laserhawks for you. All right. Next up, you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your corporation, Bear That Cares?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Bear That Cares and I run Cryptid Gaming. We're a small group that recently came to Wormholes after 3 years of nullsec PvP. We pretty much only do PvP. I usually spend my time online FCing and losing Lokis. Mr. Snowden here recently taught us how to run C5 sites in our statics, so we've been doing a little bit of that. Thanks for turning my dudes into crabs, Snowden.
You are quite welcome.
All right, and last but not least, Blood Ruin.
Hey guys, I'm Blood Ruin. I fly with the Kronos Ritual. We are a C2 nullsec group, meaning we have a nullsec static, and we don't really consider ourselves like real wormholers in the sense of doing all the hard work. We just live in a wormhole so we can get to nullsec easy, and we just constantly roll and get content. And yeah, that's us. We're a small gang group focused on small gang like nano PvP.
No one saw anything, Mr. Snowden. No one saw anything. All right. So, again, the kind of what I wanted to try to do tonight is we've got a couple of different people here, and I wanted to just give a different panel, and we're just having a discussion about what's going on. Eve's a busy place. Reddit's on fire. I'm sure many people's Discord servers are on fire. I know the Talking Stations Discord has been on fire, and there's lots of people, lots of strong opinions, and my goal here is not to just echo chamber what everyone's already been hearing. So hopefully we're gonna have some interesting perspectives and alternatives. But everybody here plays Eve, so while nobody here probably is maining in nullsec and running anoms and VNIs, I think what we can offer everybody is perspective on just where is Eve going. Is it going somewhere good? Is it going somewhere bad? And we're gonna dig into and get some people's opinions on whether or not they think that's the case. So, real quick or not quick, as long as it takes, really, I guess we'll just go from left to right. What is your gut reaction? I don't know, where were you, what you were doing? Do you remember when you first heard the drifters were attacking? But what is your reaction to the news that CCP and the Eve is, we've got drifters invading, and most recently on Friday we talked about blackout, and that's coming. So, Mr. Snowden, what is your reaction to all these changes?
Well, so the reaction was kind of two pointed. The first reaction was the holy crap, it's actually happening for about the first 6 hours of it. Then, when we actually started to sit down and talk about it as a group, as in Hateful Intent and other friends of ours in Wormhole Space, there was kind of thought of this isn't going to just affect Wormhole Space and Nullsec. This is something that's going to affect the entire game. Low sec, high sec, how it's played, who goes to Nullsec, Wormhole Space, just in general, this is the kind of change that's gonna, if the 6 rounds, gonna change the entire game's metric. So that was kind of our immediate reaction. Just we're really excited to see what happens with.
So you'd summarize your feelings that you're excited to see where this is going.
I mean, no local and null sake. What's not to be excited about?
All right, well, we'll dig into that a bit later when we dig into that specific part. How about you, Icarus? What's your reaction to everything going on in Eve?
To be honest, I was pretty excited with everything. Getting NPCs that actively hunt people back is something that I have liked to see for quite a long time, and the local thing is just the icing on the cake, in my opinion.
Icing on the cake. So you'd also say that you're generally excited to see where these changes are taking Eve.
Yeah, this is like, in my opinion, one of the more exciting changes that I've seen in EVE over the last 16 years.
Battery low.
You know, every time I charge my headset, it still does that. All right. Bear that cares. We'll just keep rolling through. So we've got two people for they're excited. How about you, Bear that cares?
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. It's really nice to see CCP shaking things up, even though it is likely just going to be temporary
Charging
stuff.
battery.
I know everyone wants to see CCP getting their balls back and stuff like that. I do feel for nullsec. It kind of hurts seeing all these fleets going out. I do feel for the FCs because people usually burn out when you get so much content like that. It's been interesting coming across Horde in a micro gang formed up in a 300-man Corm fleet, and then they just eat you up as well as the drifters. So
Cormorants for days. I hear that cormorants aren't as popular as with the latest round of drifters, or maybe it's just they need larger drifter fleets. But I know a couple of groups were actually using supers and faxes to clear away the drifter menace today.
Yeah, we jumped into like a 300-man corm fleet and the drifters shot us and horde shot us and we just died.
So it
I
was a
mean,
good time.
if we follow the meta, they should just be using bush ravens.
I don't think that'd be as effective though. Drifters don't care about you being 300 kilometers away.
That is true.
All right. Well, how about you, Blood Ruin? What's your gut take on all this?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have a little bit a different perspective. I do like change, and I hate Citadel spam. So I started laughing when things happened. But one of the first things I said to a court mate is I said, "This feels like an inelegant solution to a problem that CCP created." So kind of what I mean by that is like with drifters attacking citadels and things, that mechanic change wasn't the a natural progression to reduce citadel spam. It was just kind of like this out of nowhere kind of sweeping thing. Um, and maybe CCP had planned for it. Well, it seems like they had planned for it to then become like a lore element to create this local change. But I kind of view them as two different things. Like drifters coming in and doing stuff and destroying stuff, I think is hilarious. And obviously, if people aren't botting or if they're not AFK, then it's like whatever. But then the local change I'm really excited for. I'm really pumped to see where it goes, but I don't think that it is going. I'm afraid that CCP is gonna like roll back at least partially with observation structures. Feel like that's kind of like where it's going. So that was like my first thought process was feel like this is just kind of this quick thing that CCP is doing to get to curb some action, but it's a band-aid. Like so, yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll say that.
All right. So you're saying that your concern is that CCP is trying to solve a problem, and we can discuss what that problem might be a bit later here. But they're trying to solve a problem, and the way that they're trying to solve that problem from your perspective is probably not the right way.
Well, I think they're trying to address two different problems. One being in some format citadels and citadel spam, and the other in some format being botting and intelligence in nullsec. So I feel like they're creating two different potential solutions for two different problems. We're just happening to see them interacting in close proximity. So that's kind of like why I phrase that in that manner of a inelegant solution to a complicated problem.
Sure. All right. So we've got three people that are excited and one person that's probably thought about it more than the other three that is cautiously optimistic.
The point about the
You can't change your answer, Icarus. You already said excited.
the point about the local blackout being a precursor to the observatories is also something that I've thought about, and that's a very good point.
I would have to agree with him on that. That's actually something. If you think back to when they initiated Fazisov, they mentioned the ability to either do an observatory for local, or a observatory to show how many people are in system that were cloaked, or create a timer for how long someone could be cloaked. Because they had talked about that for Fazisov when it was first released as a possible add-in, but it got of course it got thrown away.
Yeah, and I think their roadmap was originally they had said something like summer or fall release, and by removing local, it creates it gives observatories if they affect local and some of that intelligence, it gives them more value. It creates value for that structure to exist. If you kept everything exactly the same, then when that structure does come into play down the road, it would be doing far less things and would be less of a strategic advantage, I guess. It's just a matter of like how they actually implement it, whether it's like a lot of people have been talking on Reddit about constellation wide or region wide, or if it's just specific to the system and things like that. And, there's going to be in depth mechanics like how close you can anchor them to things. Like if it's in DD range of a keep star, then it's not going to be worth fighting over and stuff like that. So, you know, that's all speculative down the line. But I mean, the problem is intelligence gathering is very easy. That's creating a very safe environment, right? So that's kind of, I think, what they're trying to open the door to play with, at least, by making these changes like earlier on.
I think Exo is busy typing to the people on Twitch. We'll give him a second, I guess. But
Well, I mean, I was giving it a pause in case anyone else wanted to follow up on that. And yes, I am also just answering people on Twitch, but um,
Back to the multitasker.
trying and failing usually. So you guys are kind of hoping though that this is a prelude to some implementation of structures that is going to restore local functionality, right?
I wouldn't say I'm hoping that, but I feel like with 7 candidates on CSM being nullsec, and we've seen Reddit on fire. I think there's like some speculation about how serious some of those people are, about unsubbing and what have you. And obviously, we as wormholers, we have our perspective from inside wormhole space where we're like, oh well, we deal with that all the time, like lol, like deal with it. But it's not just like a total shitstorm because it'll make it harder to necessarily to like hunt or find people. Um, but at the same time, I think it opens up some doors for really fun mechanics. Like I was talking with a guy earlier, and we were talking about like pipe bombing. You never see pipe bombing anymore. Really, a lot of guerrilla warfare has been taken out of play, where you have a smaller group fighting a bigger group. Except in wormholes. In wormholes, you see guerrilla warfare. You see kind of more dynamic play, and I think a lot of that has to do with like wormhole mechanics of jumping wormholes, but also just in order to surprise someone, right? A big element of guerrilla warfare is controlling the battlefield and element of surprise. You have to be able to like sneak in, and with local being such a powerful tool, it's really hard to go somewhere or get somewhere or set up or whatever, um, unanticipated. And so it'll make it more fun for me, like when roaming through an area, even though I'm not going to be able to look at local and say, okay, there's 15 people here, there's probably some ratters or whatever that we can grab and we can start a fight. What it does mean is that if we're on top of stuff, we can catch something and we can move like a backup or a portion of our gang in without necessarily being directly visible. And so that escalation potential comes into play. You have guerrilla warfare, stuff like that. And meanwhile, like the overall motivating factor, I feel like, is addressing the ability of automation and botting to utilize that intel. So it's kind of creating a more dynamic potential atmosphere as well as eliminating a lot of the tools that botters have available to them. I don't know. Maybe I'm like going full tinfoil.
No, I mean it definitely probably is leading towards observatories. I don't think it's a coincidence that this is happening in between Toronto and Vegas, where Vegas is usually one of the bigger things where they announce upwell stuff.
Honestly, with the observatories, I don't mind the idea of the observatories so much because one thing you are seeing is Eve is lacking some instincts. There's a lot of best way to put this. There's a lot of Iskin Eve that's not being spent. A lot of it's going into Super and Titan production. We've never seen the amount of Titan and Super spam in this day and age that we've ever seen. no one's ever had the fleets the size they are now. No one's ever been as good as at building them as they are now. And yeah, that due to longevity and experience. But just another alliance is to sink renter money or sink tax money into. It's not exactly a bad thing for the game. It might be the wrong way to go about it, but it's not definitely not a bad thing for the game. Find another way for melting alliances and coalitions to spend the risk. And if that's providing local, that's not doesn't harm me at all.
Well, and CCP has already talked about they're going to be monitoring, I'm sure key metrics about movement and different things. And depending on how they implement observatories, say at low level or low, like upgraded level or however they function, someone who comes into local will appear in the local channel after 5 minutes. Well, and then like you upgrade it more and more, and then it could be something like after 30 seconds, which is like your standard decloak delay. And even that I'm fine with, because like a good interceptor pilot can descan down stuff in 30 seconds roughly, and be in warp to a target, and it still really hurts the potential for botting. So while creating that reason for people to upgrade those structures and things like that. So I'm okay with some function of local in Null. I mean, I lived there for a while with like NC dot, and so I get that Null is like a big part of the playstyle, and it's a big part of my playstyle because I am constantly like chasing and trying to kill people in Null. Um, but I think like having that limited intel structure is really nice. Like I remember back a while ago roaming in, I'm talking like 4 or 5 years ago in Providence. One of the reasons I liked to roam in Providence is because you had segmented groups that didn't communicate between each other very well. And so you'd be in one group's area and you'd fight them, and as soon as they got a little crazy, over defensive, you could move to one of the other groups who hadn't received any communication really about you being in the area, and you could start harassing them, and it creates this like more dynamic situation that at least my group can interact with.
Honestly, that's an interesting thought too. I mean, if you go back, and this is going to show my age, maybe a little bit. If you go back to the days of like Rooks and Kings, when like CVA and groups were having a hard time fighting Rooks and Kings using the particular doctrines they were using, the Navpox with the carrier logic. Uh, it took time. Hi, Darth. It took time for nullsec to adapt, but when they did, they weren't able to, it was a numbers game at that point. So I think you'll see nullsec will might squirm a little bit at first, but when they figure out a way to counter it, like say gathering under a super umbrella, using paying scouts, operating in smaller groups, doing constellation based defense, just kind of intel, just keep people safe. Eventually, nullsec will adapt if they do keep it around for a long time, and we're just gotta see how they're going to adapt and what's going to adapt to, and that's going to affect like mine and blood's playstyle. And the fact that we live in nullsec statics, we're going to be watching that in real time and have to adapt too. It's the fun of the game. It's how Eve is supposed to be played.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting that the only way we're going to see what the impact of some of these changes might be is if we actually sit on them and let it go for a little while, right? Is that a fair point to take away from what you just said?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think a month time frame is what I would like CCP to do before rolling back anything. Because, like, for instance, something that we're already preparing for, we usually have an interceptor with us. But without local, right, we have to have an interceptor with us in our gang. Because before, if we jumped into a system and see 3 reds and we'd just been fighting, right, or three people from that alliance and we were just fighting, we might suspect a bubble trap on the outgate. So we might start bouncing celestials or send the interceptor ahead. But now it's going to be required, because, and if you're in like nullsec and you want to hunt a small group that's running around in your space, it becomes easier to set up bubble traps because without local, they don't know how many people are already in that system unless they send somebody ahead, and you have the potential then to ambush. So I think like that kind of dynamic and already trying to think about those things, I'm sure there will be more things that pop up. I mentioned pipe bombing earlier, but towards the end of Rooks and Kings stuff, Rooks and Kings reference number two, um, the one of the things is people got used to seeing their alts and understanding who was likely like a Sino um, in on a saber, and the fleets would start bouncing pings, and Rooks and Kings had to figure out get spies or whatever. I don't know, but we're trying to pipe bomb on pings, and but it became very difficult to pipe bomb effectively. And a large part of that had to do with intelligence that was easy to gather and, character names that you could reference pretty easily. And that may be something that comes back into play.
Pipe bombing is an interesting point in that because I think with the local change, you're going to see cloaky bomber fleets. Like you do see them in wormhole space. 20, 10, 20, 30 bombers, but Null's got the capability to put 70, 80, 100 bombers on a bubble. And if they know that fleet's going to come through and caught in that bubble to decloak without us ever knowing they're there, and bomb our fleet on going through.
Yeah, I mean
So
it's not just smart bombs, but yeah, actual bombs.
I mean, defensive pipe bombs of just you just get boson these days. It's really easy for defending groups to boson.
Well, but that requires preparation on their side, right?
Well, so would a pipe bomber setting up bombers. If
Well, but say you could set up and already have the 40 people in local, right? You don't need an insino. You can set things up way ahead of time because people can come through and not be able to scout you. And that could open up that potential for a very quick process that wouldn't allow the reaction of a Titan in the same way. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it could be pretty it again it creates more dynamic uh possibilities, and that's what I think is good. I every when you take everything to like an edge case of most optimized, then yes, there's always going to be like one thing that is the best course of action. But in Eve, many times we have groups that are not doing the most optimal strategy. Um, and by allowing the most potential for these choices to happen and for people to mess up, you can create a more interesting game. And that's I think one of the things I'm hopefully looking forward to in this change.
So, from your perspective, the underlying benefit here is it's removing some of that assured safety, automatic intel. It's introducing another element of things that people need to be paying attention to and can make mistakes on, and that allowance of additional room for a pilot error is going to create content. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like it's introducing an element of chaos. And I think we haven't had a lot of chaos for quite some time now. Probably 3 years since Citadels were introduced and things became more Empire focused.
Hmm.
Um, so now we'll see. Like I'm not sold that it's gonna be the answer, right? I think there are other mechanics that still need changes.
Right.
That's
I think I
yeah,
don't.
that's like the
I
goal of balance,
I don't
right?
think anyone is claiming or under any assumption that changes to local alone are going to solve any problems. In fact, if they stayed as the only change, I think it's the potential to create more problems exists, right? Because
Yeah, I agree with that
I
for
think
sure.
most people I have talked to, at least when we've talked on some of these subjects, are generally in agreement that right now with local and kind of the state of a lot of nullsec, excuse me, and low, to some degree too, is just it's pretty far in the direction of benefiting the prey, the hunted, the crab, the care bear, whatever you want to call them, like the people that are just trying to go make money have it pretty easy. Like with very minimal effort, they can know as soon as someone's trying to catch them, they can be leaving, or and intel is very easy. Removing that though probably swings everything very far in the other direction, and I think that without some additional changes though, like I wouldn't say that that's a good permanent place that we probably want Eve to stay in.
But these changes are inherently going to be temporary until they get the data on it and decide which way they're going. I mean, one way they could do it is they could remove local altogether and then introduce the observatories, which in turn would benefit the larger blocks much more than the smaller nullsec alliances, and I think that would be not so good for the game.
I agree. If they make them spammable, or at least they increase the benefit with the more that you have, then it's going to impact, or it's going to be more successful for larger groups, and we'll have the same issue where people are kind of forced to gravitate to the larger groups and make the larger groups bigger. But if they do it like one of the suggestions was constellation based, a small group can get the same benefit from one structure, you know, as a large alliance would, in that sense of constellation based. And so it wouldn't be as spammable, but that ultimately comes down to how they introduce mechanics. And again, like it's all speculation, so that might not even be where CCP is going with it, but
True.
hopefully it creates some middle ground for the groups that want it, um, and doesn't get out of hand for the largest groups.
Yeah, hopefully this will force the larger group to consolidate to fewer systems and allow more groups to move into nullsec systems.
So you're hoping that we might see consolidation of some groups, making room for new groups to move into?
I mean, that would be ideal for everyone. More people to shoot.
Well, the consolidation hurts smaller hunter groups. When you've got these big locust fleets. I mean, safety in numbers. It's a lot harder to pick things apart for small group. I don't know. Usually, people that are smaller null groups that move into these open spaces, they don't do a lot of things really.
What I would, it's kind of funny to think about. Is this falls under the category of hope, but don't think we will see happen. Is if under the no local, and you see consolidation to more people in tighter constellations, entire areas under the super umbrella, that you see more smaller alliances popping up in the void to fill the space, because space is not radian, not ADM is easily taken. Yeah, you'll probably won't see the coalition maps change much, but you might see smaller groups, smaller alliances pop back up again in nullsec, which actually would be really cool to see. I don't think it's going to happen. Well, more than likely, the blocks will probably keep the space under the large alliances and just use it as buffer space for against a invasion. But it'd be cool to see, and maybe if they hear me saying this, they might decide, hey, let's give some of the smaller guys a chance. Not that I'll leave wormhole space.
I mean, they could also rent it out, like we see already happening, and the rental space wouldn't be covered under like the super umbrella, but it would have upgrades that the renter groups didn't have to pay for, or stuff like I think the best way, or I think the best way to increase activity across nullsec is by space spreading things out more. um but also, like, that comes into the discussion of distributing the reward, so that the most valuable space isn't always the same system or the same set of systems. So that, like, and that's a whole different discussion kind of in turn. But the idea being incentivize groups to be fighting their neighbors and create the potential for that to happen. And I think that's how you end up with a less of a consolidation of power is by creating incentive to be fighting, you know, within more localized areas.
So I'm gonna roll us over to an area that a couple people were asking about, and actually a couple people just touched on it. So specifically, and this, I guess that indirectly, how do you guys see this impacting either yourselves, your corp, your play style? How do we see these changes touching wormhole space, right? Um, our just all the discussion we've had is super great, but I want to try to also make sure that we can touch on some things that all the other people rambling about this topic haven't been able to touch on, and that some of that is, what's the wormholer's take? Specifically, I'm curious to know, do any of you guys think that we're going to see movement from nullsec to wormhole space because of this?
To be honest, I don't think we'll see much, at least at first. But if this keeps going, if the local blackout is something that's gonna stay for a long time, then yeah, I might people might gravitate towards wormholes. But I think the thing keeping people from wormholes is probably more to do with actually having to scan your chain out than
It's the
local.
effort, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I disagree. I think people enjoy nullsec because it's a certain type of gameplay you don't get in wormholes. Like we left nullsec to try something different in wormholes. We knew about scanning and stuff like that. I don't really think that's going to change people's minds. Nullsec is still nullsec. You go there for empire building.
You don't think there's empire building in wormholes?
Well, I mean there is, but it's different.
I mean, we do have two of the larger wormhole groups in channel with us. I mean, you could ask them about empire building and wormhole.
Yeah. Does anyone want to rent C6?
Say,
I was
but
just I was just going to say I can't speak. Icarus that tells me I owe him money, and I do, and that's how I have my wormhole.
but you can't have supers and titans in wormholes. So,
I mean, maybe you can't.
You know, there is some serious gameplay differences between nullsec and wormhole space, even without local and nullsec. There's some serious gameplay differences. But I think what you're going to see, we're already seeing, and like me personally have noticed, I've got people coming back to the game who either were former hand or flew with me years ago, wanting to join because of the local blackout. We got a lot of PvPers who are coming back who are probably going to gravitate towards wormhole space because of the hunter aspect of being able to jump onto null. And it might focus on null six static corpse. It more likely will be wormhole space in general, because I'm pretty sure whenever we all of us get a null connection, we generally hunt it. But you start seeing a lot of player base that's kind of PvP oriented coming back to. And if they come back, they're going to come back probably to wormhole space. Now it's not 100%. You're going to have people who want to hunt the hunters who are going to go out to the null blocks or else the null alliances. But I'm already seeing quite a few coming back just for this particular change, this particular reason. And that's because CSP dropped their balls when they introduced this.
yeah, I have had at least 10 people get in touch with me. I'd say about 7 of them are people I knew who are coming back to the game, and then I've had like 3 people just asking, "Hey, what's KR about?" Uh, you know, I am coming back. I want to get into this because of the blackout event, and so like, and those are people like coming back to the game. So similar to what Snowden is expressing, we've got, at least from what I'm seeing, people who are interested in going and fighting because of that change. I don't necessarily think that that will mean that the people that leave nullsec will go to wormholes. I think it's more likely that they'll go to lowsec or more industry focused activities. But I do see a lot of people coming back who used to enjoy fighting in nullsec because of that change. Also, I've heard a lot of rumbling in Black Ops groups. So, like, I think the local change allows for a lot of potential around Black Ops that they're in a spot that they're not used nearly as much, and so that creates like this potential for that guerrilla warfare play in another area, um, and be a little more viable for like hunters and stuff.
Yeah. On the note of people moving to wormholes, I believe that nullsec static groups are gonna feel a bigger influx than the C5 core.
I mean, I think there's something to be said in general, just that for better or worse, like Eve is in the news, right? For people that have quit the game, taking a break, that maybe have some feelers out there. Eve is in the news at least, we've got the Drifter invasion. We've got Blackout. Um, I have no statistics whatsoever, but you see piles of people being like, "Oh, I hate these changes. I'm unsubscribing. GG CCP, you just lost my whatever number that's probably way higher than they actually own accounts for anyway, subs." But in the same thread, you've got I know I've seen. I mean, we've got a couple people that are coming back just because they're like, "I'm glad to see CCP shaking stuff up," so they're joining in. But I think there's probably a bit of correctness in everyone's 2 cents here. I'm predicting that we'll see some people move to wormholes, especially your more knowledgeable players. Say, I guess always depending on how long this goes for and what the end game here is. But um, they say, if I'm gonna have to deal with no local and needing to put effort into my intel and my scouting, maybe I should just do it in a wormhole space where
You keep breaking up.
rip Discord. I think if they're saying to themselves, if I'm gonna have to put the effort in for my intel and my scouting to make sure that I'm safe when I go out to do stuff, I can probably make better money for that effort in wormholes if they know what they're doing. So I'm predicting that we'll see some players coming to wormholes, primarily ones that maybe are a bit more familiar with it. And I think you're also right, Chris. You'll see people moving to low sec where there's still going to be some local. Um, Regardless of what happens, I think that one of just the most interesting thing is there will be movement. I predict at least. Like I can't see all of this happening in Eve and the status quo just continuing, right? Like something's going to change.
Well,
Yeah.
and even if people do gravitate towards wormholes, like I think that's a net benefit because the there's a lot of farm potential within wormholes, but the inherent risk is higher. The ships that you're usually doing those activities in have a much higher skill cap when you're talking about like dreadnoughts or Nestor chains, something like that, and they're more expensive. So, for instance, I personally have never seen a bot in wormhole space. Now, not saying it's not possible, but I've just never seen it because it is a more complex or it's a harder thing to automate.
Somewhere out there,
So,
someone just said challenge accepted.
right.
Off Ravens, anybody?
I'm actually going to say that I have seen it. It was a Nestor pilot. It's like 6 Nestors.
Yeah, I mean, you could do the friend or foe ravens at like 300k, but you still then have to like warp them in, have bookmarks pre-set up, and then get them out, and it's got to trigger the weapon system after reloads. Like it's just more complicated. You have to make sure that you're not triggering certain rats, whereas certain nullsec anomalies they come in waves, and you clear the entire wave without a trigger, right? So yeah, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's just more difficult, right? So I think that's a net benefit for the game. You have more people that are actively at their computer doing something that's good.
Yeah, I think that's gonna happen with the local as well. It's gonna remove a lot of the intel bot. But the thing is, how are they gonna adapt? What are they gonna do instead?
Yeah, and I mean the VNI changes they even said in their presentation were targeted specifically at botting, making it less feasible to do it in a very low cost ship. I like I have a ratting alt in Horde that uses a VNI because it is brainless and I'm not fully decided on what I'm gonna do with it. But you know, like I like that change regardless. And so I think that's another part of that blackout is a targeted kind of attack on seeing what kind of effects it has on player activity on one side, but also seeing how it navigates with botting and reduces that potential.
Yeah, it's my hope at least that it will reduce it a lot. Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. I think it's a good phrase in general for outlining kind of what the future looks like here. So I'm recapping some of the discussion I'm seeing in the channel here, and I don't know if all of you guys are watching the Twitch chat here, but um, some people's predictions is the main more movement we're going to see is simply people consolidating, so you'll have more empty space, and the space that isn't is going to be better protected. Um, that sounds like it's probably going to have a negative connotation, although I think we kind of touched on it, and a couple of you guys suggested that that might open up the door for some people, maybe some new groups to move in. I think it was Icarus commented that maybe
We
You
we'll
cut
might
out
just
give
again.
up.
um, we'll see. We'll just see some groups just start using that empty space as buffer zones. Um, so would you? Is there anything else you'd want to add? Cautiously optimistic. Are there any other facets that you guys wanted to dig into that maybe we haven't touched on yet?
To be honest, I think greed is gonna play a lot in. I think people are still gonna try to rat without local, and I think a lot of people are going to get killed, and I think that's beautiful.
Well, I
Beautiful
mean, especially
explosions.
with VNIs, it's all about cost. You rat for you AFK for 3 hours, you paid for the VNI. So I still think people are gonna understand that even though they're losing more, they're still making a net profit, especially across like, well, you're gonna have to change it up to like Dominic's is, but 10 Dominic's alts, you're still making a net profit even though you're losing X amount of Domi.
I think one of the focuses may also shift towards like DGs and not just escalations, but actually like going out and scanning, and that creates more activity. And that could also be a way for those nullsec groups to get intel. If you have a lot of people moving around and scanning, and that person jumps a gate and sees a person on the gate, similar to how we see people in wormholes, that they could then report them, and you can start to narrow down where that person is and where they're moving and what ship they're in. So that could be like a potential adaptation that people start to kind of move towards, which would be good in my opinion too.
So you think the changes are going to make more nullsec players learn how probes work?
I hope.
I
I
mean,
mean, either that,
that's just the step, right? That's just the
yeah,
first step to accidentally wormholing.
it's either that or we're gonna see 50% of nullsec just evacuate. Like I hope that's not the case, but we'll see.
I'd
I
say that
mean, I think
that's good.
I think when you're actually going to see nullsec evacuate is if they get rid of asset safety and nullsec. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, like, we don't want to turn this into a like yell at nullsecers or anything, but we don't have asset safety in wormholes, and you know that's part of what we like about it.
Ooh, the loop pinata.
Yeah, and even for like, I don't know, for smaller groups, there's skin in the game. There's risk. An eviction has consequences. Um, and even as an attacker, like sometimes you piss somebody off, like they might get other groups involved or something and pay them to help evict. I mean, I think we've all been part of different evictions, both on attacking and defending sides, and that the reason that exists and is fun is because of a large part because of asset safety not existing in wormholes.
Like I tell every defender, and this is something for even like newer wormhole groups that might be listening to, this is a good thing to remember. Being overly prepared for an eviction, for someone to finally come and evict you, is never a bad thing. And just remember, the attackers have to be lucky all the time, and the defenders only have to get lucky with a chain or a scout. So, but I know we're never going to see asset safety leave nullsec, but I think that's the only way you'd actually see nullsec evacuate to lowsec would be, oh no, my keep star died. All my supers and titans are going to drop. They're going to put that keep star in.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think like a full removal of asset safety would even be good for nullsec. Maybe like some limited asset safety, but full removal, I just wouldn't be as fun, and you'd end up with like one group, like this was mentioned in Twitch chat, you'd end up with just goons evicting everyone in the game, just if there were no asset safety. Um, so that I don't think that would necessarily be good, but yeah, I mean that's what makes it fun for us. So
That falls into the fact that I don't think we see CCP is not done with this. The fact they released this, they talked about this less than a month after Eve North. They got a couple months till Eve Vegas. They had a couple months to feel out what happens with no local, with the drifters, see the response, see the Reddit fire, see what actually happens in game to decide right before Vegas, do we continue this line of thought or what tweaks do we need to make? I think the VNI change is really good for changing out the VNI, but that also falls under we'll see how it works. I think you're going to see all the bots gravitate to Dominix's since alphas can run Dommies without issues. It just takes a
well,
little more SP.
they also did limit the alpha heavy drone skill. They took it from level 4 down to level 3. So with the Dominix, you're putting in more upfront like ISK investment, right? There's insurance, blah blah blah, but you're putting up more in initial investment, and you're making less money over time than you were previously. So like that's a net benefit, and I think those changes are going to be permanent. The thing with local blackout, and a good part of why they tie it into like lore, quote unquote, of stressing the system and all this, is they have the potential to go either way, right? Like things were permanently damaged, and while you can still see statistics, and you can still use jump clones and like all these things, local is now delayed permanently or something. Or 1 month down the road, hey, the event's over, like lore corrects itself, like all this, and the drifters are beaten back and Concord restores power to all systems. Like they could go either way, and that's what we're waiting for, is like, what are the metrics? How does this actually affect gameplay? um, do people just like hunker down and turtle up and not do anything? Because that would also be bad, you know. Um,
I think that's
so
especially bad for two reasons. It's just that one, if nullsec empties and ever no one's undocked, so there's nothing to hunt, everything's just dead. That's just no fun. But also from the context of if CCP is trying to feel out changes to make, I think that sort of reaction might give them the wrong impression, and they might backpedal farther than they actually need to. Um, so
I think
please don't all just quit Eve. That'd be nice.
well,
it's
and I
funny
think,
if we saw that where they all docked up and stopped them docking and quit even nullsec. Bloodroot and his group might actually have to warp to their C5.
oh man, that would be rough. If I have to go to that
Do
C5
you
more
guys
than
find
once
it?
a day, I just give up on life.
I mean, do you guys even find your C5 any?
Occasionally.
I think nullsec will adapt. They always adapt.
That's true. But what I like most about all of this, is that nobody saw this coming.
CCP is probably just having a ton of fun, and I mean that's something people don't really think about. I mean, it's a software company, it's a game company. It's probably really good morale for their employees right now. They probably get good ideas and are a bit more.
I gotta say, looking back, this involves with this, but looking back at Eve North, there's three of us that was at Eve North. Uh, the fact that someone asked about this in the AMA and CCP casually just said, we had talked about it internally a little bit and just diverted off the question, and none of us picked up on it. That was golden. Burger and Falcons slid that off just perfectly.
Well, I think I'm gonna move us towards wrapping up here. It's been a busy night, lots of really good discussion here. Is there any other big notes people wanted to touch on here?
I'd like to ask CCP to buff the Cayman while we're at it.
I don't know if we have any devs watching the stream tonight. I know a couple episodes ago we actually had a dev just chime in Twitch chat and he was like, "I like that, and I'll talk to Rise about it." But
Yeah,
if you're out
that
there,
was the
CCP,
Lashak math thing, right?
yeah, Icarus would really like it if the Kamon was a bit better. So Icarus is a big Kamon ratter. He runs sites in his Kamons, or
I don't
so I'm
know,
told.
CCP. I want a corpse empty.
Just a corpse MTU that just pulls in corpses. Okay.
Yeah. On that note, I would like to be able to impale spikes on my Fortis. Sorry, impale corpses.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we're going down that road, I would like to be able to like run a phantasm into people and then like them get stuck on the end of it. You know, like if I bump someone with a 100 MN afterburner phantasm, like I feel like they should just be impaled to the end of it.
Well, if CCP's out there, hopefully they're scribbling frantically. These are critical. These are critical additions, way more important than all the nullsec stuff we talked about for an hour. Local, who needs it? It doesn't matter. What we really need is spikes on our ships, and my cats to stop knocking everything over. That would also be beneficial to everyone involved.
I mean, if your stuff had spikes on it, they wouldn't be able to knock it over.
That's danger talk though, because you know once the cats figure out how to pick up spiky things, we're in danger zone.
Oh boy.
I think like I see this as like another side of experimentation. Like we've seen kind of this story arc with we get citadels, they kind of expand the power base, and then they move towards experimenting with new AI. They do new events that create incentive, right? So it's like carrot, right? Rewards for moving around and being active. Um, then like abyssal PvP, more experimentation with AI and AOE effects and things like that, like debuffs. And now I think maybe this is one of the first like iterations of a stick, like creating a risk or a detrimental change and seeing how players react to it, right? And seeing if that provokes movement and things like that. So um, I personally would love to see stuff like this continue, even if it's temporary changes tied to an event. But seeing like how that affects things with local things like citadels being restructured in a way that might be temporary but allows them for metrics, stuff like that. So I think like overall it's good, and I enjoy it from at least a wormhole perspective. I would not be surprised if drifters come to wormholes at some point and start fucking stuff up, because there's also a lot of just low powered structures in wormholes that get beaten down from time to time by wormholers. But like it would be pretty funny to try and have to like defend our stuff inside a wormhole. uh Might be a little scary actually with no asset safety, but like it would be pretty funny. Like I would suddenly become very interested in PvE because like I need to save my wormhole, kind of thing. Like so that'd be pretty cool. But I think like overall that this arc that they're kind of on, I think we're kind of coming around to a new phase of that arc. And it seems or feels like to me they're they're done experimenting with building up some of these pieces, and now they're moving around to tearing down old pieces and making things increasing the risk. So I'm really excited about that, and hopefully it continues over the next year, and gives us all reasons to continue playing.
Thinking back, you mentioning about whether or not null sec players will come to wormhole space. I just kind of had a reminder about that. I think we'll see them come to wormhole space when they revamp the bookmark system. We get ACL book.
Oh
Oh yeah,
yeah.
that was a thing I thought was hilarious because like it was only 3 months ago they were at a presentation and somebody said like it's really hard and really difficult and we don't even think it can really happen, and then like here comes Toronto and oh by the way we figured it out and you'll have alliance bookmarks like
Yeah, it was just one guy with the 20% of his time thing.
right, like that to me is just on one side I'm really like happy and excited, but the other side I'm like, so was it really that big of a problem or did it just, I don't know, maybe that one person was a genius. Like come
Well,
on.
you know how four people will stare at a puzzle, the fifth one will walk along and solve half of it for them to get them started. I think this was the
Yeah, now we just need to get passes out of the game, right? That shouldn't be too hard.
hashtag CCP win.
Right?
I think they're saving that for eVegas.
Maybe
Yeah,
they just discovered deleting passes will also delete local.
I don't know how far Izuki wants to go with the show tonight, but I've had this tinfoil hat theory for almost 2 years, like since the beginning of Citadels. My theory was that they made Citadels strong intentionally from the beginning so that everyone would just only use Citadels and only put up new Citadels, and they would tear down their passes and put up more Citadels. And then like as soon as passes get taken out of the game, I'm just waiting for like the nerf hammer to hit all these different structures and like just slam everything. That's like my 2 year like tinfoil hat that I've been like holding on to hope with, and and also then it creates like it would give them the opportunity to create structures that do very different things. Like only one structure gets tether, and only one structure gets offensive weapons, and only one structure gets mooring and different stuff like that. But that's been like ever since Citadels came into the game. I was like, I really hope that they're doing this. Like they're secretly they have all these plans to just break Citadels after passes are gone. Like
Blood, your conspiracy theories have always been fake.
That's that's a theory, all right.
It's a lot of tinfoil.
Izuki's over there like hashtag NDA.
I can't confirm, deny, or even comment on that theory of yours. That's why we'll just leave it at that's a theory. Maybe it's
Yeah,
complete nonsense. Maybe that's word for word what I heard at the CSM meeting last week. Maybe absolutely nothing related to anything you just said was talked about last week either. No one knows.
I was gonna say like, hey, I mean, end of the day, there's a wormhole around CSM. I think we're all happy in this room. So.
Well, don't celebrate yet. Haven't actually gotten anything done. But I think I'm going to try to wrap us up here. So beyond your theory that you had there, anyone else have any quick shoutouts they wanted to make before we wrap it up?
Laserhawks are recruiting.
Are some people were asking in channel Icarus, are you also a good point of contact that can sell people Titans in wormholes if they wanted to transition from null where they have their Titan to wormhole space where they'd like to have their Titan?
Yeah, of course. If people just contract their Titan to me in nullsec, and I'll give them a Titan in warm.
Now, is that you're gonna move it for them, or do you just already have some in wormholes to trade?
No, no, I have some in wormholes. Yeah, I'll trade them 1-to-1.
Okay, glad to hear it. It's
I'll
not.
uh I'll shout out Fayroll. He's a corp mate in Chronos Ritual. And he and I recently started a podcast focused on small gang PvP, and we're having fun. So he's a good dude, and he is a dedicated like podcast listener of all podcasts. He's actually the one who like got me involved. And yeah, Big shout out to Farrell. He's a good dude.
Anything else from anybody?
Negative. I think we've had enough tinfoil for the evening.
All right. Well, I'll wrap it up with my own little shout out here. So, uh, I haven't been able to get it out in the news a whole bunch because CCP's got their world tour thing going on, which means that social media is really hard to get any attention from them. But if you were unaware, I run a meetup and it's in upstate north of Albany, New York. So if you're in the States and you're looking for another meetup because you're missing Eve North already, August 1st to August 4th, we have a meetup taking place in New York in the United States. www.evenortheast.com. That's our dank logo for this year, and always looking for more friends to come hang out with us and chill. If you're wormholers, the meetup is super wormhole heavy. It's got a lot of wormholers coming from my own crew and a bunch of others. I think that about half of the current attendees are all wormholers. And if you're not a wormholer, that's fine too. We have good food. There's alcohol and parties and prizes, and you can just come barbecue with us for the weekend, and it'll be a good time. So, questions, concerns, feel free to drop me a line. But that's always, making new friends is always fun.
Yep, of course we got Eve Vegas coming up October 25th to the 27th too. So if people haven't bought their tickets and they're on the fence about going, I highly recommend if you've never been to an Eve meet, go to Vegas. Your first one, Vegas. Oh, you can come say hi to a bunch of us there.
Yeah, I mean we've got Vegas. I think the next meetup I think is technically Eve Home, but I don't think they're doing much advertising for that since literally none of us are allowed to go. And then we've got G Fleet in Berlin as I believe September, followed by Vegas in October. So busy year. If you haven't been to an Eve meet yet, I would really recommend going to one. They're a good time. And I think it'll be fun. So I'm going to leave it at that. I hope everybody has a good night. Thanks for joining, and I welcome feedback. If people have, hey EXO, come make an episode where you talk about XYZ, get XYZ on. I'm welcoming feedback or requests for how can me and Wormhole Space come talk to everybody. So have a good night, everyone, and thanks for coming.
Yep. Bye.
Praise Bob.
Praise Bob.